We're headed to a place called Red's Canyon that supposedly has some old mines and a ghost town. The reason I picked it was because I opened up the book and it was there, and it looked good enough for us. About 30 miles westbound along the I-70 from Green River is a secret turnoff marking the beginning of this adventure. In the open plains is a group of wild burros, originally introduced to America in the 1500s by the Spanish. These hardy creatures were relied heavily upon by pioneers, miners, and prospectors. Another encounter is with a herd of antelope-like creatures known as pronghorns taking a midday siesta. The horse is a symbol of the American West. They're commonly called Mustangs once they've turned back to the wild.
This morning I noticed that the coolant level was down a Mickey Whisker from where it normally should be, indicating loss, and that is always a cause for concern. Last night was very cold, and I know in the past from last winter that there is a little coolant leak in the hose just underneath the thermostat. This only happens when the engine's sitting cold and a cold night. Once it warms up, it's fine. Probably just need to replace the hose clamp, as that hose is fairly new. But at the moment I'm going to do nothing. Best way to deal with problems, I think, sometimes is just bury your head in the sand and pretend they don't exist. So we'll just monitor that situation and keep an eye on it. Other aspects of the disco is that we have the transfer cases as leaky as ever, and we're just topping that up as we go. It's not too bad. And you'll see those rubber boots on the ball joints for the tie rod and the drag link have already split. We replaced those only about 6 months ago, and brand new across the board, and they're already buggered. That's from Terra Firma, so I don't think when they finally wear out I'll be replacing them with those. I'll get the standard issue ones. Other than that, touch wood, let's reach over and grab this tree, that everything's holding up fine.
Cricket, you need help. You need to help me find firewood.
Stuff's going up like a furnace. It's shaping up to be quite a chilly night tonight, and what better time for a hearty, heart-warming stew. So that's what we're going to do in the camp oven tonight. Wilms will be spearheading this operation because she's a little more handier at the culinary arts than I am.
A good stew needs vegetables. So we've got ourselves a nice little selection right here. But of course, the main event when it comes to stew is going to be the meat. So we're going to start off with that. First thing we need to do is get the camp oven really hot, as well as some oil inside of it. Dredge the beef in a little bit of flour. This will help kind of thicken up the stew. Doing the veggies a little bit chunky because that's the way I like it. Well, just when that oil's hot enough, that's when we'll add the beef for browning. Already dredged. All right, and you want to get a nice brown on all those pieces, all over. Really adds to the flavor. No, you're too strong. You're too strong. I can't get. Oh, I got it. Good job. When it comes to spices and stews, I like to keep things pretty simple, which looks like it's a good thing, seeing as how we've got basically nothing that's gonna go good in this stew except for salt and pepper. Toss this big piece on.
Yeah, I think we need it.
I'm gonna add a few of the onions now, maybe like a third. It's a personal preference. I don't know if anybody else does this, but I like the flavor of the onions to kind of seep into the broth and everything, but I also like the texture of the onions, and that's why I put them in a little bit later too. So just gonna add a few. Now that the meat's browned, it's time to add the broth. I am just gonna use bouillon cubes, which is not what I usually use, but hey, we're out in the bush. And to do that, first I need water. We're gonna use the coffee plunger, which still smells a little bit coffee-y, which might add to the stew. We're gonna add some wine now. Normally I'd braise the beef in wine before the broth, but we actually had second thoughts about using it because wine's not that easy to find in Utah. At least not as easy as it is in California, where we come from. But I'm gonna add a bit in just for flavor. What we'll do is let that boil down a bit, and then we'll cover it up, let it stew, and then we'll add the veggies.
Oh, it's a hot fire.
All right, finally it's time for the rest of the veggies.
Gonna nicely warm up this loaf of bread to go with the stew.
Bring some more over to warm me up too.
You might have to shuffle in closer.
I'm trying.
Oh, that might. These are hot coals. Spread them out a little.
I think that's done.
South Africans make up a stew and they call it a bunny chow when you fill up a partial loaf of bread full of the stew, which I think I might do to a certain degree. Although I did forget my spoon.
What do you think? Have you tried it yet?
I'll tell you right now. This is very nourishing on a cool evening. This old shack here, built right in the middle of the creek, which you'd expect to be washed away at some time during heavy rains, but it covers over a well or a seep that has water in it. And there's a big pack rat nest in there, so he's got a great place, access to food and water and shelter. What more could you ask? A distinctive landmark along the route is Family Butte, with its cluster of spires rising high over the plains. descended from the high country down into a wash surrounded by spectacular cliffs in a big canyon. And combined with the dirt roads, the lack of crowds, we've only seen a few vehicles at all. It kind of, to us, is even more special than the national parks. I think it's where we'd rather be.
We've set our course to find the Lucky Strike mines. It should be up ahead somewhere, and I think they used to mine radon around here. They also warned that there might be undetonated explosives around, so to use caution.
Don't want to touch them.
No.
Might lose a finger.
Or worse.
Situated beneath the imposing cliff face is a Lucky Strike ghost town and mine. The original claim was staked back in 1949 when a team of old-timers prospecting for uranium found what they were looking for in this side canyon off from Reds. Cricket is amped to begin exploration. A rather battered-looking chariot lies in a dry creek bed full of bullet holes. The little dog thoroughly investigates the wreck, as she is quite an enthusiast in vehicle restoration. But this one's a no-go. The structures here date between 1955 and 1965, with several tar-papered cabins still standing. This partly buried bunker was a powder storage shed. Reports say the men who worked here were in their 60s and doing all their own mining, drilling, blasting, crushing the ore with sledgehammers and loading the trucks with wheelbarrows. Flow of tailings spilling down the slope betrays the location of mining activities, though now the entrances to the tunnels are no longer accessible. Uranium in the southeast Utah is often found in rocks dating back to the days of the dinosaurs that can be found a ways up the rubble, making access a little tricky.
A turnoff from the main track leads to a valley of green alongside a watercourse known as the Muddy River. This open plain beneath the walls of Tomish Butte is yet another historical site arising from the quest for uranium. We managed to find ourselves a shady spot to set up camp. In addition to rabbit bush and tumbleweed are our old friends the cottonwood trees, and high up above the cliffs is what's called Hondu Arch. We're not alone out here. Cricket spots a group of cowboys and cowgirls returning from a foray out into the desert to a little tent city farther upriver. Aside from the horse folk, a downy woodpecker is our only visitor.
Although the waters of the Muddy River are quite clear at its current level, the moist, slick sediment it flows over creates a sticky layer that clings relentlessly to boot tread and proves difficult to remove. Below the sheer rock faces where the cliffs of Tomsic Butte meet those crumbly slopes are the Woodpecker Holes, old mining shafts now long abandoned. The entrance is sealed to protect people like me from themselves. The remains of an old ore chute in serious disrepair. Back in 1949, a government program was formed that encouraged men to prospect and mine for uranium, bringing thousands out into these hostile lands. This open flat in the valley was populated with numerous trailers accommodating the workers. There are also several cabins and a schoolhouse that have since burned down. The largest operation was the Hanert mine, with its rock-sliding structure a little more intact. It allowed uranium-laden ore to tumble down the steep slope of the trucks that would take it away. Cricket's doing some assessment of its structural integrity. Heavily fortified mine portals above include one that's very intriguing. Its barred gate allowing a glimpse down a tunnel into the heart of the mountain.
At the day's end, Mother Nature paints for us a stunning portrait of the wilds of Utah. The atmosphere takes on a magical glow, and the colors highlight the Hondu Arch above us like a pastel painting in the sky. All this is lost on little Cricket, who's already called it a day. Once the sun does set, a bright moon rises and fluffy clouds race overhead. Tomorrow is a new day and a new adventure. In the next episode, we visit a strange land occupied by stone goblins, marvel at towering structures that reach the heavens, and explore a valley of gargantuan monuments made famous from Hollywood westerns. Be sure to join us on yet another journey of discovery in the American West.